All right, good morning, Compass. Yeah, thrilled that you're back with us, and I'm excited to continue to kind of go through our series. If you're just joining us, maybe it's your first time with us, man, welcome. We are thrilled that you're here, and we've been working through a series of messages called the Four Chairs. And what we've been talking about really is Jesus' sort of commission, his great commission on all of his followers and the disciples to make disciples. And so if that's going to be our driving passion as a church, and we say that in our mission statement, we're here to help people find and follow Jesus, well then how do we do that? How do we make sure that we're on task and we're making disciples? And maybe the best way to kind of get plugged in on that is to start by assessing, where am I in these four chairs that we've sort of set up as a framework for understanding where you are in your walk or your journey with Jesus. And so we're just going to kind of recap a little bit, and then we'll talk about where we're going today. But these four chairs, we said, represent four different places where you might be in your journey with Jesus. The chair one is that chair where you're not yet a follower of Jesus. So obviously this can include a wide range of people, right? Everybody from somebody who's not interested or believer in God at all, somebody that's following another religion, all the way up to somebody who's very, very interested in Jesus but has not yet sort of committed their lives to him. They haven't trusted him for salvation. They haven't stepped across that line of faith yet. And so a lot of folks, and we all start here, a lot of folks are in this chair, but once you do cross that line of faith and you do commit to following Jesus, you're in that chair too. And this is that new believer. When the Bible says that you're born again, you really are kind of an infant for a while. You're completely dependent on other people to sort of supply your needs and to help you grow and to teach you things and to feed you. And so naturally, this is a phase where everybody who's following Jesus has to start, but we crave and we desire, and God is calling us into different stages of maturity. And so by the time we get into chair three, instead of it just being me and God, and this is about my life and my experience with God, now we're starting to become aware of other people and their needs, and it's us, and it's we. And when I start thinking about, man, what is it that God has in store for me? Not only a new identity, but a new purpose, right? Some new work that I have to do. And the invitation that Jesus has given people that we get these ideas from is that, hey, he calls people to follow him. But here, by the time you get into the chair three, he's called his disciples to become fishers of men. And we're going to talk about that some, and we're going to really spend most of our time today talking about chair three and how Jesus kind of called these guys who were interested in and getting to know Jesus and who were following Jesus to now have a real sense of purpose and meaningful work that they were called into doing. But ultimately, even there, we're still being called further into maturity, into that place where now we're really a committed follower of Jesus. We're a spiritual parent. We're helping other people find faith in Jesus, and we're producing sort of an abundance of fruit in our lives, so to speak. And so this is the framework that we set up, and the hope is that as we go through this, that you have a really good sense through these characteristics, through these defining moments of where you sit in your relationship with Jesus, and maybe most importantly, what's your next step? And so as we've gone through this passage so far, and as we've kind of talked about these things, today we find ourselves, we're really going to park a little bit in chair three, or at least in the transition from chair two to chair three. And in order to do that, we're going to look at how Jesus treated some of his own disciples and kind of the transition that they went through. We're going to look in specifically in Luke chapter 5. So if you've got a Bible, I'd love for you to turn to Luke chapter 5, or maybe click there if you've got an electronic Bible on your phone or whatever, and really encourage you to download that. You can take notes there. You can highlight things there. That's a really, really great tool to be able to use. But basically, 5 guys that Jesus is interacting with were fishermen. You got Simon Peter, his brother Andrew, you got James and John and Philip. And all of these guys grew up in the Sea of Galilee area where they were fishermen, not only by enjoyment, but by trade. Right? They were doing this for a living. And we get the idea from chapter 4 in Luke that Jesus has called these guys to follow him. Now, depending on how you read that text, and as we look at the context around that, they probably spent the next year literally following Jesus around, going where he went, listening to his teaching, watching and observing the miracles that he was doing, and eventually making their way down to Jerusalem, and now they're back in Galilee. And the amazing thing is, I'm sure that their families were probably excited that these big, rugged fishermen finally had a little Jesus in their life. Can you relate? Okay, a little bit? Like, man, that's really good. I'm glad that they're sort of a part of what Jesus is doing. And at the same time, they've been gone for a little while. And while they haven't been earning money, the bills continue to show up at home. I don't know how bills worked in the first century, but I know that they had to continue to pay for things. And so they're finally on their way back to Galilee, into their hometown. What do they naturally do? Well, they go right back to their day jobs because, hey, it's time to earn a paycheck. We got some bills to pay. We got some mouths to feed. Our families, our wives, they're kind of like, hey, glad that you've had this time with Jesus, but we have some needs at home. And sadly, what we're about to read is that their first night out was completely unproductive. And I want to kind of get us into the sense of frustration that they're feeling, because the passage is going to explain that they went out all night long and didn't catch anything, and so the pressure is mounting. There's probably some tension at home, and they got to pay the bills. So imagine the frustration as we dive in. Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 1. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, which is another name for the Sea of Galilee, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God, and he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. And then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. So what he's got is a big crowd of people. There's this natural slope to the shoreline. And so Jesus takes advantage of those natural acoustics and sits out on the water on this boat. And his voice is able to reverberate and everybody's able to hear. And so verse 4, when he had finished speaking, then things change. He says to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man. For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. And so they pulled up their boats to shore and left everything and followed him. The time had come for Simon and his other companions to change gears. They had been following Jesus. They had been in what we were calling chair 2. And Jesus is calling him to chair 3. He's calling him into another gear, another level of participation with him. Now, what we need to understand in terms of context is that for these fishermen, fishing was not a hobby. Anybody like to do that? You maybe travel out to the beach this summer and you throw some lines out in the water, or maybe you've got a boat or you've got a friend with a boat, because a friend with a boat is a little better than a boat. Anyway, but you go out and you can go fishing a little bit. Some of you are like, you really do inshore fish. Others of you, maybe you've gone offshore. You've gone in the salt water. Maybe you've gone and taken a charter and you get to go out. And man, that's exciting. That's sport fishing. Maybe you get some, you get something that you can eat. That's kind of fun. Or you go out and you're trying to catch a big trophy fish and take a picture and all those things. And that's fun. That's appealing to a lot of people. But it's not the same thing as commercial fishing. Right? People that do this for a living. And that's what these guys were. These guys were going out and braving the waters in first century, boats. This is risky work. In the first century, the way that you would fish around the Sea of Galilee was to go out at night, and you'd cast your nets all night, try to bring in some fish, and then you come in, and after cleaning the fish, then you had to clean the nets, and inevitably you have to repair them, anything that might be torn or whatever, and as the sun starts to come up, you lay these things out on the shore and on the rocks, and this is hard work. I liken it to maybe the show you guys seen on the Discovery Channel. This is an old show, but The Deadliest Catch. You've seen this? Right? This is not just people going out and enjoying fishing. This is This is commercial guys who are going out. It is an insane amount of work. It's extremely risky and hazardous, but it's not only lucrative, it's worth it to them. Why? What is it that draws these guys to go out and risk their lives battling against the ice and the wind and the waves and the storms and all the heavy machinery and all the potential for damage to their bodies and ultimately to their health? Why did they do that? Well, because not only is there an enormous payoff, but I think for some of them, for most of them maybe, it's just in their blood. They can't imagine doing anything different. This is what they were sort of born to do, and they just love this career. And the same might be said of these disciples of Jesus, these fishermen. They had made it their life's work. But now they've started to spend a little bit of time with Jesus, and they're excited to share in that ministry. And so Jesus asked Peter, hey, can I use your boat to preach from? Peter's all happy. Yes, I'm all in. I want to take a little ownership. And this is an easy ask for Peter. Right? He's like, hey, sure, I'll give to the ministry, no problem. And Peter goes in and lets Jesus preach from a boat. But now, after Jesus is done talking, now he's raising the stakes. And this is where I really want us to kind of lean in a little bit, because as we look at the life of Jesus, we look at how he treated his disciples, I think there's some clues in there for you and for me into what he's drawing us to. He's raising the stakes and he's elevating their game a little bit, and he wants to invite them into something a little bit more serious. It's a simple request. Put out into deep water. But I hope you sense that there's a little bit of a tense moment. Think about it. Remember all the pressure at home? Remember all the pressure to provide? They've been gone for a while. It's time for a paycheck, and they went out all night long. They didn't sleep, and they didn't catch anything. And then they've been working all morning at dawn, trying to get their nets ready to dry out and potentially go back out that same night. And here Jesus says, hey, go out, put out into deep water. They were tired. This isn't just joy for them. This isn't a vacation. This isn't just pleasure, but okay, Jesus, you could charter with anybody. Why are you getting us involved? Plus, we just finished cleaning our nets. You want us to go get them dirty again? Not to mention, what does Jesus know about fishing? I mean, he's a carpenter, right? He's a teacher. Everybody knew in the Sea of Galilee, you catch fish in the shallow water at night. You certainly don't go out in the daytime. You never test your nets out in the deep water. What is it that Jesus knows that Peter doesn't know? What is it that what he's asking Peter to do runs contrary to all of his experience and all of his training and everything that he knows. And this is the amazing thing, Peter obeys anyway. Like it's kind of crazy. But if you're like me at all, you read in that text and you see where Peter says, well, because you say so. And I got to say, are you sensing that he's a little reluctant? Well, Jesus, because you say so. Like, I know this doesn't make any sense, and, what you're saying, we're probably not going to have any luck, but because you say so, all right, I'll give it a shot. It kind of sounds like Peter doesn't really want to do it. I think sometimes this is where Christians are at, okay? There's commands that we're given, and there's things that we don't quite understand, and they're certainly not going to be convenient, but we're in chair 2, and we're trying to live this life out. We're trying to follow Jesus, and so, okay, because you say so, I'll do this. Because you've commanded me to do that, I'll try. I'll give it a shot. And that's fine, I guess, as we're beginning to sort of conform to Jesus. We have this new command. There's something, maybe exciting about trying something new, but the real motivation here is a sense of obligation. I have to, because this is what God's telling me to do. And eventually, it can even come out of a place of guilt. Well, I feel kind of bad. I'm not doing what God wants me to do. I have to do it, even if I don't want to do it. And this can certainly be true, right? Of a lot of things that God calls us to. What if there was a better motivation than that? What if there was like another gear of maturity where you've got an opportunity to do the things that God's commanded you to do, and it's not done just out of a sense of obligation, like, I have to do this. It's done out of a deeper place, like there's a different motivation that would lead me to do this, a whole other level to reach. So they go out into deep water, they let out the nets, and then this is sort of the amazing thing. Their muscles flex, smiles start to flash across their faces. They start to pull in on their nets, but they can't get them. Their muscles are bulging, the nets aren't moving anywhere, and they pull a little and realize that their nets are full, chock full of fish. So much so that even they bring their partners over, and both boats are being pulled under the water from the weight of it all. This is all the blessing they can handle, right? This is too much. How would you feel? So all your dreams about your career finally came true, right? The big sale, you landed the big client, you got the big bonus, you got the most massive paycheck you've ever gotten, you finally got that promotion, finally got that corner office, whatever it is that you've been just dreaming of is the milestone of the best you could possibly achieve in your career. Or maybe it's a relationship goal. You finally hit that level of life where it's like, man, I have waited for this so long and I'm finally here. You finally reach sort of that pinnacle of all you expected. What would that be like? These fishermen, this is the greatest catch they've ever seen. And they're excited, no doubt. They're awestruck. Truth is, I think they're overwhelmed. In fact, I think Simon Peter gives us a clue as to what's going on in his heart. Because, yeah, he's a professional fisherman. This is the best catch ever, absolutely. But I don't think that that's all that's coming out in Peter's words here. I think he experienced something bigger than he had ever imagined. He had just witnessed a miracle. He just witnessed Jesus doing something at work in his life that was bigger and greater and more exciting than anything he had ever sort of hoped for. Scripture even says that God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or even imagine. And everything that these guys had ever hoped for and more was starting to happen in this moment, and I think it overwhelmed Peter. Listen, if there's a lesson to be learned, check this out. The closer we get to Jesus, the less the things of this world excite us, and the more we're excited about what he is doing in the world. The things that we think are really exciting, the things that we think would be just the peak of all that we've hoped for in this life become less and less thrilling once we get a taste for what God wants to do in and through us. It opens up our eyes to a whole other world. It's like Neo, take the blue pill, okay? It's like you wake up and you're in a whole different place than what you thought. That was a reference to the Matrix, sorry. Okay, here we go, ADD, here we go. Whew! I think ultimately, Peter is absolutely overwhelmed, not because he just had a big catch of fish, but because he just watched Jesus do something bigger than he ever thought, and that's a game changer. Simon Peter, his response to that in verse 8, another passage, another translation says, when he saw it, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, Master, leave. I'm a sinner. I can't handle this holiness. Just leave me to myself. You'd think that Peter would want Jesus to stick around. He's good for business. You're coming on every trip now, right? Like he is the opposite of me. I go out fishing and we never catch anything. Like everybody takes pictures of all these fish. Anytime I've ever been out fishing, nothing, right? It's awful. I am definitely I don't know, might as well take a banana on a boat. Some of you get that one, right? It's like, it's awful. I'm the worst, luck. Jesus, you're coming with us on every fishing trip because we're going to set the market every time. But that's not their reaction. I don't think that's what Peter's thinking at all. I think in this moment, Peter is now seeing things a whole new way. He's opened up a whole nother understanding of what's going on. This miracle is evidence that God is in his presence, in the flesh. And he has the same reaction that every human being does when they encounter the Lord, right? We have this overwhelming sense of his holiness and our unworthiness. Peter, professional fisherman, his whole life has just been outfished by God. He realizes how inadequate he really is. We have these moments, these humbling moments where we realize just how massive God is. And don't miss this. They left their nets and followed him. And that tells me they didn't follow Jesus because they wanted him to catch more fish and help them be more successful. They left and followed Jesus because they wanted to do more of what Jesus was doing. They wanted to get to participate in that. Jesus could have maybe made their business succeed. That's not why they followed him. It wasn't to keep filling their wallets. They followed Jesus because working with Jesus was a bigger thrill than having the best payoff they've ever had fishing. What if the biggest thrill in your life wasn't even something you've been thinking about or dreaming about up until here? But suddenly you experience doing something in partnership with God, and it opens up a whole other world, and now nothing else satisfies. The only thing that's going to fill that need is getting to experience that again. What does that look like? At the very least, it's no longer, all right, Jesus, I'll do this because you say so. It's, I want to do this because I want to see you do this again. I want to be in on what you are doing. Once you get a taste for that, nothing else will satisfy. Does anything in the world compare to working shoulder to shoulder with Jesus? Right? That's what God is not only inviting Peter and James and John and Andrew and Philip to do, he's inviting every one of us to do that. Okay? These guys probably would have been happy to do nothing but fish for the rest of their lives, and Jesus has just ruined it for them. Because now nothing will satisfy them other than continuing to be able to be a part of Jesus' purpose. His new purpose was, hey, you're not fishermen anymore, now you're fishers of men. Their whole identity went from catching fish to now sharing the love of God. Don't lose that shift. Don't miss this. Because that's not only who they were, that's who we are. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is who Jesus has told us to be now. Especially as we move into the third chair, right? This is our new identity. Above any other pursuit in life, any other thing we've thought or asked or imagined for our lives, reaching other people with the good news of Jesus takes over. Sharing the love of God becomes the newest thing. And just like that show, The Deadliest Catch, the work is hard, sometimes it's dangerous, but it will be worth it because there is nothing more valuable in the world than people's eternal souls. I hope you're beginning to discover about these chairs that it's not a strictly linear path. It's not like you get on the assembly line and you just move through these things on a conveyor belt the same rate as everybody else. No, people move at different paces. Some people grow up in the church. Some people are new believers. They're the best workers anywhere because they're just so excited and so enthusiastic that they can't help but work. And other people, they can't wait to help but share what they're experiencing with Jesus. They want other people to work in on that. Other people have been in the church for years and they haven't gotten out of their high chair. Dan Spader, who writes the book called 4 Chairs of Discipling that we're basing all these chairs on, he writes that our teenage years undoubtedly are fun, right? You look back at the things that you did and the exciting times that you had as a teenager, but those of us who have grown into adulthood, we would all say this, I think, of our teenage years. I'm kind of glad that's done, all right? I'm kind of glad that I don't have, the pimples and all the stuff, all the things that, like, I'm really glad that now I'm past that and I can get to continue on into maturity. Like, I don't have all the same rules and things. I mean, yeah, I've got more responsibilities, but I don't want to go back. I mean, maybe for a day, maybe for, to relive a moment, but I don't want to, stay there, do I? And that's what we start experiencing. Chair 3 is sort of those teenage years between infancy in Jesus and maturity in Jesus. And there's some exciting things that happen here. We're going to make some memories we're going to have for the rest of our lives, but it's not terribly comfortable staying here. Right? Once you move out of infancy and you start trying to take care of things on your own, you hit these awkward moments, these painful sort of moments. Like, people let you down. Things that you were hoping for don't come on so easily. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. And the temptation is to sort of stop all progress, just sort of quit. I wonder, if we look at what Spader says, I wonder if this is true of you. In order to get to chair 4, we have to go through chair 3. And this is what Spader writes about chair 3. He says, it's a life of suffering and servanthood and sacrifice. It's our calling. It's a life of joyful victory, overflowing with his grace during the difficulties of following him. It's not easy, but it is right. It's not free of problems, but it's our joy and privilege. It's the journey through which the Lord, in his wisdom, has chosen to build in us the character and priorities of Christ. And it's the deep longing of all of our hearts is to be like him, right? It's Jesus giving us opportunities to develop responsibility, to take on tasks and to try things that we don't necessarily have a safety net for. And it makes us uncomfortable, and we start to experience difficulty. But it's necessary if we're going to reach maturity. Now, here's the big question, right? Some people in chair 3, what you really need more than anything else is to experience God using you, experience him challenging you, experience him bringing in some sort of great catch that you realize you're unqualified to make on your own. But that means that you have to try some things that you might feel unqualified to do. You know, maybe you try serving in church. Maybe you try to serve in the kids area or the nursery or something. Can I just let you know a secret? Like, I can stand up here and preach, and it's no big deal. But you put me in front of a group of kids, and I am terrified. Okay, like I'm so scared that they're gonna like not pay attention. Everybody have this, like they're gonna bounce off the walls, like, and if they're really little, like I'm gonna upset one of them or I'm gonna step on them or something. I don't know, they're gonna break, they're real fragile. And I'm so scared that like they have no clue like who I'm at and they don't wanna know. And so they're gonna just like throwing things at me. I'm just nervous as all get out. Like I talk to adults all day long, but like 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, terrified. For years, this is what I did just to stretch myself. I went and I would speak at this like summer camp for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, the junior, age kids. And I was like scared to death, like I'm gonna lose them. Like I used to think I was good at this. I'm terrible at this, And so it was like stretch me and make me a little bit better. And maybe that's what that is for you. Maybe you try to do something maybe in the church and you're trying something, you feel a little overwhelmed, you feel unqualified to be able to do, but that's a stretching that you need. Maybe it's not in the church. Maybe it's sharing your faith with somebody. You haven't done that yet. You haven't really told somebody else what Jesus is doing in your life. And you think, you got all these noble reasons why, but the truth is because you're scared to do it. You're not really sure you feel prepared to do it. Listen, the only way God does things through us is our willingness, our openness to try things that we don't feel capable of doing. If we could do it all ourselves, how would we know if God was involved? But if we try things that we don't feel like we're quite capable of doing, then when God comes through for us, we get to experience, oh my gosh, he just filled in the gap. He filled in the void. All the things that I lacked, he provided, and all of a sudden this went well. And if you don't experience God working in you, it's really, really hard to stay motivated to trying to do things that are difficult. It's not just, listen, serving is not just religious activity, like that's the next step in your journey with Jesus. No, it's exposure to being used by God. And here's the trouble. If I want to experience some real spiritual breakthroughs, I got to keep trying to do that. I got to stay in that chair 3 long enough until I see it happen. One of the most critical lessons I think that we learn in chair 3 is learning to kind of be a vessel of God, learning to allow God to work in us and through us, learning to rely on the Spirit instead of my own strength. Sadly, too often we get stalled in this process and people come to Christ and we start to grow and we want to be used by God, so we do. We sign up to volunteer like kids' church or do some event or whatever, or we try to reach out to our neighbors, start inviting our friends to come to church with us. And all of a sudden, in the fear of the moment, in the busyness of life, in the hard work of serving, we've given it our best, and after a few months, we find ourselves wore out. get tired. We hit a wall. We get a little disillusioned. Something didn't happen, didn't go the way that we had hoped or planned. Problems surfaced. Imagine that in a church full of other imperfect people just like me. Somebody ticked me off and I got frustrated. A little bit of my joy has sort of tarnished. A little of the sparkle has faded. And now I'm left wondering what went wrong. See, God, I did my part of the deal. I thought you were going to show up. I've been serving and now I'm all exhausted. What happened? Paul describes this in a certain way. He's talking about trying to navigate the tension between doing what feels comfortable and what comes naturally, and doing what the Spirit of God is leading him to do. And he feels this tension in his own spirit between his flesh and his spirit and his heart. This is what he says in Romans chapter 7. He says, "For I know the good itself does not dwell in me, that is in my sinful nature, my flesh, but I have the desire to do what is good, but I can't carry it out. For I do not do the good that I want to do, but the evil I don't want to do, that I keep on doing." This is tension. And he goes on to say in verse 24, "What a wretched man I am. Who's going to rescue me from this body that is subject to death?" You know what's interesting about this? The spiritual giant Paul writes half of our New Testament. He says the word I, me, or my 40 times in one chapter. 40 times. He gets to the end of the chapter. Who's going to rescue me? He finally acknowledges Jesus. Jesus is going to have to do the stuff I can't do. Jesus is what helps me exceed past my limitations. And in the next chapter, Romans chapter 8, he speaks of the Spirit and living in the Spirit and obeying the Spirit and following the Spirit, how the Spirit has set us free. And he speaks of the Spirit 19 times. If you're in chair 3, this is the transition Jesus is trying to develop in you and in me, right? In our hearts. To go from trying to do it on our own to partnering with him. When we are open to partnering with him, we start to experience him working in our lives. And only when we realize it's not about me, it's about him working in my life, that I can finally move into maturity. And we have to go through this. We have to develop this. And it takes time. You can't just microwave this. You don't just step in this, for a few days, a couple weeks. But here's what happens. We hit the wall and we want to quit. Can I just ask you a question? What do you want to do? You want to go back to infancy? I mean, what would you tell a teenager? Man, being a teenager is so hard. All these pressures, all these difficulties, or questions I just don't understand. I'm mad at everything. I love everything, but I'm mad at everything. It's all over the place. I don't like this anymore. Well, what do you want to do? You want to go back? How many of us in adulthood, you want to go back to teenage years? No, listen. The only way from infancy to maturity is through chair 3. The only way forward is through. You can't go to maturity where we all want to be unless you go through chair 3. And it's in chair 3, and sometimes it takes a while. It's in chair 3, we have to deal with the discomfort, the stretching, sort of the breaking of my pride and myself, my own pursuits, because some of that stuff might be getting in the way from me really experiencing God working in my life. And until he breaks that stuff down and refines me into who he wants me to be, I can't reach into maturity. You want to go back? Most of us want to go forward, but we don't realize the only way forward is through the discomfort of chair 3. Unless we keep growing, unless we stick it out, we're going to be doomed to a frustrated life, maybe a legalistic life, a life of burnout, lost joy, unproductivity. Never going to get to chair number 4, the chair of maturity, the chair of spiritual parenthood, unless you let God work this out. And there's just no shortcut. You got to learn to depend on God. You got to endure hardship. You got to take up your cross and suffer with Jesus, right? But it's worth it. You think those guys who were fishermen left everything? You think their lives turned out great? Tradition tells us that it cost every one of them their lives. But not one of them faltered because they had come to decide that being used by God was better and greater than anything else. It was greater than the best career in fishing they ever imagined, like living the good life, retiring and dying of natural causes. Is that the extent of your life's dream? I think that's the American dream. But what's God's dream? That be used by him, poured out, and experience so much blessing we can't imagine. See, learning to serve and to share God's story and to benefit from reading the Bible and help other people understand it, this is part of what happens in Chair 3. So that other people can know Jesus. And by other people, we mean not just strangers. I mean your spouse, your kids, your parents, your cousins, your coworkers, the other students at school, the other parents at the ball game. And the only way we're going to overcome deep-seated sin is through a deeper and deeper connection with Jesus and pursuing holiness rather than just happiness. And the motivation has got to be there, right? The motivation for these guys totally changed. Hey, because you say so, all right, Jesus, I'll try it. No, because I want to see you do that again. Nothing in this life compares to that. I want more of that. That's the motivation that changes. What are you hungry for? What you want? God, bless what I want to do. Help me get my goals achieved. To God, I want to achieve what your goals are. I want to experience what you have for me to do. What are you hungry for? Nothing satisfies the way that working with Jesus and letting him work in and through you satisfies. See, church is not just some neat idea, right? Compass Church, this doesn't exist because, hey, we want to put a sign up and we want to have a really cool worship service and we want to experience, a lot of fun and we got some cool programs and we're just going to pop ourselves up like any other, fast food life enjoyment facility. We're just here to try to make life a little better. No, we're here because we believe that we make an eternal difference. That the things that we're doing and that God is doing through us are going to last far beyond all of this stuff is gone. And we're looking for people who want to stand up with us and say, yeah, that's what I want to be in on. Who's going to step up to the challenge? Who's going to say, I'm on board. I want to be on the team. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. I didn't get all dressed up for nothing. I'm not backing down. You said there's going to be trouble. Trouble's my middle name. Let's go. Because it's too important not to. Not only do I want my family and my kids to know Jesus, but the people who are next to me in life, the people who are next to you in the row, people who are next to you in the next cubicle, in the next office, the next door neighbors, they're somebody else's kids, and they want their kids to go to heaven too. Suddenly I started to realize, you know what? Every single person in the world is a child of God that he wants so badly to get back, and all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed with the fact that I want everybody to know Jesus. And there's just nothing in my life that I want more than that. Nothing else that I could achieve in my little world is as big as getting to see other people rescued. So that's why we spend the time that we do. Even the people that are difficult, right? Even the people who talk behind our back at work, even the kids who picked us last, even the ones that are difficult or stink or don't look good. That doesn't mean being a doormat, but it does mean that, you know what? I'm going to do everything I can to try to win those folks so that they can know Jesus, so that their lives can be changed too. And here's the deal. It won't be easy. It won't be easy. I don't know what you signed up for. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hazardous. It's going to be treacherous. It's going to be hazardous to your life goals. It can be counterproductive in some cases, but it'll be worth it. Because once you've had a taste of that, nothing else will satisfy. Most of us here this morning because somebody else invited us to know God, right? Somebody told us, hey, you should get to church. Somebody invited us to this church. Maybe at Compass, like I'm really excited about what we do. You're like, hey, come check out our band, man. They rock, Come check out our kids' church, man. Compass Kids. Like your kid will never be bored at church. Like we could be really excited about that. And we got a lot of cool people and stuff. Come drink our coffee, right? Our coffee is helping people in Rwanda. Like maybe that's what, and I think that's awesome. That's really cool. We got great coffee. But what are we really about? I want you to experience moving from chair 1 into chair 2 and to know Jesus. And I want you to start doing what people in chair 3 are doing so that you can start maturing, and eventually that Jesus has led you to a place of maturity where we are just winning people to Christ. We're seeing lives change. We're seeing our world change. I want my life to matter. So just a really couple simple next steps. It's not terribly specific. But if you're in chair 1, you're not yet a follower of Jesus, man, I want you to experience chair 2. I want you to come to a place of faith in Jesus. But if you're in chair 2, I hope you understand, you're not called to stay here. You don't want to be a perpetual infant. It's so exciting what Jesus wants to do in us. But yes, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be tough. And if you're here, and you've been in chair 3, or you've tried serving, you tried to develop on your own some maturity, and you hit some rough patches, you hit some difficulty, you got burned out, you got burned up, you got frustrated, God let you down, you started experiencing disappointment, you're not sure what went wrong. Listen, the only way forward is through. Don't go back. Don't go backwards. Because eventually you get to be on the other side of that. Man, I'm glad that part's over. I want that for you. I hope that you want that for yourself. I wish I knew, right? 5 of Jesus' 12 disciples were fishermen. And so for them, it meant leaving their business. I don't know. The rest of the guys was a little different. Your life situation might be a little different. I don't know what Jesus is working on in each of our hearts today to be able to continue to step into maturity and be used of him. I don't know what he has in store for you, but here's what I can tell you. There's nothing else that's going to satisfy that need, that's going to scratch that itch. What is it he's put on your heart this morning as we've talked? That's what it is. I can't be more specific than you. He's got something so unique and so exciting for you. And maybe it is serving in a church. Maybe it is stepping into something new, stepping into community with a life. I don't know. It probably includes some of those things. Are you open to it? So here's what I want to do. I want to give you a chance to mull that over, to talk with God about it, do some business in your heart with him. We're going to do that during a time of communion. In just a moment, I'm going to pray, and after that, if you're a follower of Jesus, we'd love for you to have communion today. There's 2 tables in the front and 3 in the back that have communion elements. 2 cups, bread in the bottom cup, juice in the top one, and we eat and drink this every week as a church because Jesus told us to. He said, I want you to remember me. By doing this, I want you to remember his death, burial, and resurrection on the cross. That was the price that was paid for us to have this new relationship with Jesus. But he's not just done that so that we'll continue to carry on whatever we think is going to be exciting. No, he's done that. He's bought us. He's paid the price so that we can experience maturity. He's got so much in store for you. Can we just pray? Whatever it is that God's got on your heart, I want you to think that over as we have communion. If you just need prayer today, you want to talk to somebody about stepping out of chair 1 into chair 2, we'll meet you in the back. We'll talk to you about what that looks like. We'll pray for you. We want to serve you in that way. But I think God, in the next couple minutes, is going to do some really powerful work. And then when I'm done, the band will lead us one more time in singing before we're dismissed. Father, I am grateful for this time, this place, these people where we can meet. And Lord, I recognize there's people in all 4 of these chairs here today. I'm excited that you gather us together, that you're the common denominator. We're here to learn about Jesus. But God, that you have a specific enough will that you meet us in whichever chair we're in this morning, that you lead us to faith and you lead us towards maturity and you lead us through the discomfort of adolescence spiritually, calling us to a deeper purpose. And ultimately, you're leading us towards maturity where we really bear fruit that makes an eternal impact. God, I pray you're meeting each of us where we are right now. Help us to clear the obstacles that are keeping us from taking the next step. Help us to wrestle with the tensions that are on our heart right now. And help us to agree in our spirit with what you're uniquely calling each of us to next. And God, I'm excited to be along for the journey and to see how you're going to use this church to keep shaping and molding each of us in our walk with you. God, use these next few minutes to do business on our hearts, help lives be changed. And we ask in Jesus' name.